This all began late July of 2012. I come from a small town where everyone knows everyone. I had just turned 18, and as most 18-year-olds in my town, we'd like to go drinking down the beach and have a bonfire. I would have my regular group of friends who I would hang out with, and we would go for drives to the bigger city to find things to do. I was on one of my drinking nights with a close friend of mine. We'll call him Adam. So Adam and I went for a drive from my parents' house in the rural area to town, and we decided we wanted to go out to the big city to watch a movie. After saying goodnight to my parents and hopping into Adam's car, we went to the movie theater and had a good time. After the movie had finished, we decided to go to McDonald's to get some food. This is where I met the man who ruined my life. He served my friend while I stood beside him at the counter, busying myself with my phone, texting friends and whatnot while Adam placed our orders. The guy who was serving us gave me a smile, and I smiled back as I said to my friend I was going to have a cigarette. He nodded and I went outside. Moments later, he walked out with our food, and the guy who served us was walking behind him. He came and stood next to me and asked for a lighter and introduced himself. We'll call him Chris. So Chris sparked up a conversation and gave me his number and said that he'd like to take me out sometime for a movie or something. I agreed and made plans to see him the following weekend. After about a month of spending a lot of time with Chris and him coming out to my parents' place, we agreed to make our relationship official. He would spend most weeknights at my parents' house. I lived in my granny's flat on my parents' property, and he dropped me off at school in the morning to the disgust of my friends who all caught the bus. One morning after Chris had stayed over and was driving me to school, I said to him that we should pull up next to the bus, which was waiting for students to climb aboard. One of my friends was waiting next to the bus, so I stuck my head out the window and told her to climb in. This was mistake one, introducing the two of them. A few weeks after my friend met Chris, we broke up, and it was a messy breakup. Shortly after the breakup, the scary shit began to happen. I would hear people walking around the gravel driveway at random hours of the night. I would see Chris's car sitting down at the end of my parents' road under the streetlight before I would go to bed. The stalking progressed to where I could hear him standing outside my ranch slider talking to someone, then trying to jiggle open the garage door and walking around in the gravel. Things began to really become scary for me when I would receive phone calls and texts from a random number during class about how this person was watching me as I would walk to the bus every morning and what my parents were doing throughout the day, and threats with things like how they were going to break into my house and rape me and hide the body somewhere deep in the forest where nobody would ever find me. At this time, I was finishing my end-year exams and preparing for university applications, and feeding all sorts of information to my friend who we'll call Julia. She, unknown to me, had been spending more time with Chris since the first introduction when we gave her a lift to school. This was a fatal mistake on my behalf because she knew exactly where I was going to be, what my timetables were, and when I would most likely be alone and an easy target for Chris to find me. They began to date, and the texts became more frequent from the both of them. Even an attempt to harm me one evening when I stayed late with people from my drama class working on our final performance for the year, and would be alone in an easily accessible classroom until about 10 p.m. Some of my classmates noticed his car parked across the road from where our classroom was, and said it looked like there was two figures sitting in the car waiting for me to come out. I freaked and rang my mom and informed her. She came and collected me and took me home, watching the road to make sure that they hadn't followed us. The shit really hit the fan when I became so scared that I had to go to the police about the messages I had received, and the fact was that there was someone coming into the property and trying to break in and harm me or my parents. Chris carried weapons in his car because he liked to hunt, and I knew it was also for security purposes because he was in the underground world of drugs. I had lodged a formal complaint against Chris and informed the police of the weapons he had on his person and in his home, so the police went around and they had a look for anything, but they couldn't find anything, which set him off even more. That evening, he sat down at the end of the road as per usual and waited for all the lights to go out. Then he came out along the front padlocks of the house and up the driveway. I was sleeping in my parents' living room, which was right beside the driveway, with big open windows and ranch sliders to my brother's room. I heard him walk along the side of the house on the driveway and towards my flat, thinking I was there, and I heard the sound of a gun being cocked. I sat up for a moment thinking, what should I do? I commando crawled down the hallway to my parents' room and quietly said to my mom, "Someone's outside." "Mom, get up, someone's outside." My dad bolted upright and grabbed his robe and his .22 rifle and ran out of the kitchen door, setting off the sensor light, and bolted down the driveway chasing after somebody that ran through the information padlock. After that night, things calmed down for about a month, till I was packing up to move 10 hours away to a new city. The night after I left, my mom rang to say someone had been in my house and had walked with muddy boots on because there was rather large footprints all over the house, as if someone was trying to scope the place out. Odd things would happen at my parents' place, like trees would get cut down in the middle of the night, or a car would drive super slow past it with all of its lights off at odd hours of the night. Things started happening to me at my new apartment. Each morning when I would go out, there would be a car always parked across the road with windows tinted out, watching me. And I would receive voicemails of a violent nature from private numbers. This kept up till late last year, when it all stopped. No phone calls, no sightings of random cars, no odd things going on at my parents'. Every time I go home, I never tell anyone when I'm leaving and when I'll be back at my parents' for my own safety. I get flashbacks when I hear something like a car backfire or I see a car similar to Chris's driving around. I always keep my home address private and my phone numbers restricted for my own safety, because he's always hunting me and I don't want to put other people at risk. I always say to my mom, if I go missing, you'll know where to start looking. Update. So this was originally written at the end of 2015 and kept private because there was a spark of activity. I had traveled home for Christmas period. I was due for major surgery in January, which meant I couldn't spend time with my friends or family after it, along with the death in the family. Stupidly, my sister had said to a few friends who were well known for not keeping their mouths shut and see Julia on a regular basis, that I was going to be home till mid of January. I wasn't actually at my parents' home till the end of January, but my father had an encounter with Chris. First time in 3 years we had seen him, and he had pulled up along the side of the fences and stuck his head out of his window. This is normal to have people talking to my dad from their cars because we live in such a small rural area, and we are rather close with neighbors who are all a fair distance away. He stuck his head out and asked if I was around and that I was an old friend. My dad clicked instantly as to who it was and said if he didn't leave right now, he was going to grab his gun and that's the end of it. Chris laughed and said, "We both know you won't be doing that before I put 2 bullets in your head. Now where is she?" My dad, thinking on his feet, said that I was in a hospital 3 hours away and that I'm now living in the biggest city north of my parents' house. He thanked my dad and said to him to watch his back. My dad didn't tell me this when I came home from recovery because he didn't want to stress me out. But I changed my cell phone number and made sure my social medias were extremely tight, with no geotags or anything that could give away where I am. It's scary to know that someone still holds a grudge to this day, because I know some extremely sensitive information about him.